Good afternoon, everyone. Today's webinar is titled No Higher Calling, Strategies to Create a Climate of Safety and Quality Education, and is being brought to you by Lightspeed Technologies in partnership with Safe and Sound Schools. My name is Tony Zekel, Senior Vice President of Revenue for Lightspeed Technologies. You may be wondering why an instructional audio provider like Lightspeed is sponsoring a school safety webinar, and the answer is quite simple. At Lightspeed, we believe that every word matters and every second counts. Because every word matters, we deliver the teacher's natural voice to all students in the classroom with the use of a convenient and simple wireless lanyard microphone that connects the speakers specifically designed for improving teacher audibility and intelligibility, so the classroom listening environment is enhanced. Hearing is the primary communication channel by which students learn. Research has shown that students, particularly young students, need to hear over 90% of the words spoken in the classroom to comprehend what is being said. In contrast, if you were only hearing 50% of the words from our webinar today, you would be able to piece together the unheard words because of your background and education. Young listeners just cannot fill in those blanks in the same way as adults. For this reason, this solution has become standard classroom technology for many classrooms and school districts across the United States. In addition, because every second counts, Lightspeed utilizes that same teacher microphone through an integration with the existing building emergency communication systems for mobile silent panic alert notifications and with the building's phone system for teacher-initiated phone calls. With the Lightspeed Cascadia solution, you can now improve communication both inside the classroom and across the entire school campus with a teacher communication tool that is simple, mobile, and immediate. For more information, feel free to reach out today through the chat feature or connect with Lightspeed through our follow-up email or website. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping items to cover. First, all attendees are on mute. If you have any technical difficulties, please use the chat feature at the bottom of the screen and we will work to resolve it. We welcome questions and/or comments, so feel free to ask a question at any time using the Q&A feature at the bottom of the chat window. We are recording today's session and we'll send out the recording to all attendees and registrants in a few days. Our webinar speaker today is John McDonald. John co-founded the Council for School Safety Leadership in 2022, and today serves as the organization's Chief Operating Officer. This national school safety organization provides crisis management services for executive leaders. Prior to his current role, John served as the Executive Director of Security and Emergency Management for Jefferson County Public Schools in Colorado and was recognized internationally as the architect of the post-Columbine High School Tragedy Security and Emergency Management Plan. John has been recognized by the U.S. Department of Education as a subject matter expert on active shooter preparedness and emergency plan development. John, thank you so much for sharing this valuable information with us today. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tony. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Let me share my screen with everybody and we can get started. I'm an analog man living in a digital world, so give me just a moment to get this right. All right, I think we're good to go. I just want to say thank you to Lightspeed and Safe and Sound Schools for the opportunity to be here with all of you today. Anytime we can talk about school safety, it's a good opportunity and a good time to do it because today matters because we don't know what's coming tomorrow, but we know what our communities are going through each and every day. As Tony said, my name is John McDonald. I lead two programs. I lead the Center for Education Safety. That is the Missouri School Board Association School Safety Resource Center, the only privately run school safety resource center in the country that operates for a state. I also lead the Council for School Safety Leadership. And as Tony said, we provide critical incident response services for executive leaders all over the country. And both of these programs operate under the Missouri School Board Association umbrella. One of the things that we learned very quickly is that we don't do a great job training our executive leaders on how to manage crisis. critical incidents, moment in time. What is their role? What can they do? How can they be a support? How can they be a great leader in times of tragedy? And it's important that we provide that support. We spend a lot of time with our schools, what they should do in our given day. We spend a lot of time as directors of school safety on what we should do. But the conversation for superintendents, school boards, attorneys, uh, and other executive leaders, COOs, does not happen very often. So that is a niche area that we've found that becomes really important because leaders keep schools safe, and the policy guidance that comes out of that decision making matrix and flows down to districts and schools can really pose challenges if we're not all on the same page. As Tony said, I spent 14 years as the executive director of school safety in Jeffco Schools in Colorado. And it's a unique place. Um, Jeffco Public Schools has had 3 school shootings in its history. Within 35 miles of Columbine High School, which is a Jeffco school, uh, the Denver metro area has experienced 10 school shootings in 21 years. That's an average school shooting of every 2.1 years. And that timeline is both incredibly important and exhausting and devastating to our entire community. If I have any message I can leave you all with, it is this: do all you can to live in a world of prevention, because tragedy, frankly, is just too damn hard. A lot of the work that we did with Columbine High School in helping transition from tragedy to recovery to a place where there is an amazing climate and culture was overseen by our now retired principal, Frank DeAngelis. And you really have to find somebody who has the heart of a community, the heart for the work, believes in the kids and sees the good in everyone, that can lead you through crisis and tragedy into a good place of recovery. Make no mistake, though, the Columbine legacy uh, continues for all of us. And if we look at tragedy around this country, we look at school shootings, we'll talk a little bit more about this as we go on today. The history of Columbine is that so many perpetrators and other acts of school violence look at Columbine as a place of inspiration. If you have a student that is engaged in studying previous school shootings, has a fascination for a tragedy, for Columbine specifically, you better get them on your radar, pay attention, because that is one of the most extensive indicators the Secret Service has found to identify somebody that is moving on that pathway of violence. What I'm going to talk about today comes from my perspective, the work that I've done. I've managed a lot of critical incidents for more than 30 years. So this is really opinion based. It's based on just lessons I've learned, mistakes I've made, experiences that I've had. I don't try to be anything I'm not. I can talk about the stuff I've done, the stuff I've seen, and the personal mistakes I've made. And I will talk a little bit about the mistakes that we as systems are making across the country, because I think it's important that we understand where we're struggling so that we can figure out how we're going to get to a pathway of success. And for 25 years, we've been struggling to figure that out. K-12 education, I think for all of us, feels like a very uncertain world right now. And public education is under attack across this country. And it really requires that we look at the world a little differently. It requires that we pay attention to the issues and the threats around us, and that we're managing those as they happen moment in time, but we're also planning for the future. And frankly, if we look at the fight we face day to day, it's complacency, it's mindset. We still hear people say it can't happen here. We still have organizations that have a mindset that says that will happen to another district. It won't happen in our school. Or they have a mindset that says, we're not going to take a drill seriously. We're not going to put the time and the effort into planning for these events because it's more important that we educate, that it's more important that we support mental health efforts. Look, school safety is foundational to great quality education. A student that feels safe in their school, the studies tell us, have better test scores, higher graduation rates. They want to be there. That's where they feel safest. We can provide that environment for them, but it's incumbent upon us to work at that. And it is a heavy lift. So that mindset of being prepared, not being scared, being aware, and not looking at the world through rose-colored glasses is really important for everybody in our system in 2024. But we're still facing this issue with too many are working in silos. We got to kick the silos down. We've got to knock those down and have conversations, be good stewards, and be collaborative. And I say this to every educator on here. If you don't have good relationships with your local law enforcement agency, you fix it, and you fix it today, because tomorrow is too late. And if there's a law enforcement person on here, school safety professional, if you don't have good relationships with your educator, you fix it, and you fix it today, because tomorrow is too late. It is so important that we learn this lesson above all else, because if we're not collaborative, if we're not willing to engage with each other, if we're not willing to partner and find common goals for a common cause, then we're just going to see the same failures time and time again. 25th anniversary, 25th memorial of Columbine High School is coming up in the next month. 25 years of the modern era of school violence, but it even started before then. Paducah, Jonesboro, Pearl, Mississippi, Springfield. Those school shootings all happened within a year and a half earlier than Columbine. Columbine changed the world because the media had the opportunity to see it firsthand and bring it into every living room in the country. And it changed the narrative. Unfortunately, it also led to 25 years of ongoing school violence that we continue to try to figure out. And that challenge for us has proven to be costly, exhausting, and frankly, we've lost too many lives trying to figure this out. The struggle and the win, I will be honest, I've come to believe begins with prevention. And we haven't done a great job in the prevention world. We're really trying to figure that out. And I think more and more we are working towards ideas and solutions that look at prevention. But the issue is that if we don't prevent, then all we have is to respond. And if those attackers that are coming to our schools are going tactical, all we can do is go tactical with them. And no matter how good our response is, it's still a failure to prevent. So how do we fix that? How do we stop that pathway to violence at its earliest inception so that we don't have to get to that response phase? Because when the first shot's fired in a school, we lose. No matter what happens, as great as the response is, we've still lost because the impact, the trauma, the mental health issues that come from that, the stressors, the post-traumatic stress that occurs for everybody in that structure and all those people in our community, we've just lost. So if we can figure out the prevention while still being strong in our response, I think that's our greatest opportunity. I want to make it clear though, and I think we have to have an honest conversation, that not every threat's a school shooting, but every threat deserves the very best. We have lost too many kids, too many educators in our schools that have been murdered, that have completed suicides in schools. And those kids that have been traumatized, those kids that have been impacted, those kids who have been murdered, they deserve better than they got. They deserve better than we gave. And that's incumbent upon us to step up and own this, from prevention to preparedness to response to recovery. And that all starts with mindset. The threat of our time, it's overwhelming our system. If you look at this slide, from human trafficking to the out of control behavior to the school shootings, the sexting, the social media, the threats, and now the artificial intelligence, that's all in the last 20 years, maybe 25, the modern era. Schools are not set up to manage this type of activity, this type of issue, this type of threat. But yet it's on our doorstep. It's here. It's impacting us every day. People wonder why we're struggling to educate our kids. Well, if you think about the classroom time that is impacted from out of control behavior, teachers managing student behavior, a 55-minute classroom period when you're dealing with a student that's come to school that's been abused, a student that may have an eating disorder, student that's suicidal or exhibiting suicidal ideation, online bullying. All of this is happening every day. Was it any wonder, as we try to manage the behavior, we're not focusing on educating our students? How can we? K-12, I think, is this fragile ecosystem. And when I think about what that means, I often think about how education was originally formed. I mean, our original goal was, let's teach reading, writing, and arithmetic. Well, today, if you draw a line across reading, you'll see that we're focused on social emotional because we have to be. You look at writing, we're focused on threat management because we have to be. You look at arithmetic, draw a line, focused on mental health because we have to be. Now all of a sudden, the structure of reading and writing and arithmetic has become all things to all kids because we have to be. There's no one else that's doing it. No one else that can engage in this behavior and engage in this response to the threats that we're seeing. So with that in mind, is it any wonder that we struggle today to try and figure all this out? But with that said, there's something happening in our schools. And for all the differences in first responders and educators, both believe in this duty to protect, this concept, this ideal, this sacred responsibility, duty to protect our most precious resource, our kids. And I think there's honor in that. The fight is just, the cause is righteous, because every kid deserves a safe school learning environment, free from threat, intimidation, harassment, bullying. If we protect our kids, we put the structures in place, we're willing to have the hard conversations and do the hard work, then we're allowing our kids to grow and learn and thrive in our environment and not just survive. I've come to believe that there's no higher honor and no greater responsibility than protecting our most precious resources, our kids. That's our job. That's what we get to do every day. And it's something that we need to continue to remember and lift up and have conversations about the importance of that responsibility, and we need to communicate that with our communities, with our kids, with our parents, and frankly, remind each other, because this is the hard work and it's not going away. I don't think it's going to get easier. I think the next 3 to 5 years are going to be extremely challenging in the K-12 space. Our kids, they want hope and help, and every child deserves our very best. That's incumbent upon us to figure this out. And if we don't do that, then what are we doing? We're just facing more threats and responding more often because we're not doing the work on the prevention side. Now, great school safety is critically important, but it doesn't always have to be expensive. People think, well, school safety just means you're putting a lot of money out. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But there's stuff that you can do that, frankly, doesn't cost a single dollar. And let's just talk about building a positive climate and culture for just a minute, because that's the prevention piece of this. And we'll get to the response side, but not a single dollar is needed to build a positive climate and culture. All it takes is effort, and it's exhausting. But every student deserves a kind, caring, trusted adult in their life. Every student deserves to have that connection with somebody that can help and give them hope and guide when they need it. That's the work, the most important work in the school environment. But it begins with each of us. What do we tolerate? What do we normalize? What are we modeling? Who are we championing? Look, when we see bullying today in a school, are we confronting it? We all know those adults in schools that haven't confronted it. And when we don't confront it, what do? We normalize it. What have we told the victim? We've told them it's okay. What have we told the perpetrator of the bullying? We've said it's okay. And it's not okay. At some point, those red lines that we used to have become really important today when we say no more, not here, not now. What are we doing to model? How are we becoming a good citizen to champion for our kids? What are we doing to help lift our kids up who are making the right decisions and really promoting that effort? I think if we do that, we have great hope in all of this. We'll say this, and for all of you school people on here, you know what I'm talking about. For some reason, our schools struggle to shut and secure doors, exterior doors. We are terrible at it. We see prop doors everywhere. I created a program called Stop the Prop a couple of years ago. I think it's in 30 some states now. It's super simple and easy. Stickers on the doors, stop the prop. Kids are making commercials about it for public service announcements in their school. Stop the prop. Security teams are using stop the prop and training educators. For whatever reason, we think we have to prop doors because, maybe we can't breathe in a school or something. But locking the door, securing the door doesn't have to be expensive. Just pull it shut. Kick the rock out of it. Create the climate and culture where nobody props the door. And if we do that, we create a time barrier for that outside threat. It doesn't cost a single dollar, though, to shut the door, pull the rock out of it. Yet you would think it's the biggest lift in the world in our schools. So that's just one idea. But it goes back to mindset. Mindset's free. No more, not here, not now. That doesn't cost a single dollar. And we can all do that. But that's incumbent upon us to model that, to be good leaders, to lift that up, to sell our vision of school safety to our educational partners so they understand how we benefit the education side. What's the ROI, the return on investment, for a school where we've reduced violence? Do we see those higher test scores? Are we measuring that? People say you can't measure school safety. I think they're wrong. I think you can. I think one of the ways that you can measure school safety is simply to ask your students and staff if they feel safe in your school. And when they tell you, then it's incumbent upon you to actually do something about it. A few years ago, when I first started in this business, we measured school safety. And in our district, 69% of the kids said they felt safe in school. Now that's in the shadow of Columbine. We worked hard over the years to try to change that. And when I retired, we asked that question one more time. And we were over 93% of our kids said they felt safe in school. And in a district of more than 86,000, I was pretty happy with that. But that meant 7% of our kids did not feel safe. And the question becomes, why not? What grade levels are not feeling safe? How do we do a deep dive into that to figure out how to keep kids safe? What's happening in their world, their environment, in our schools, where this message, no more, not here, not now, is not getting through? Because if we're not always looking at this, always trying to fix this, then we're just destined to repeat the cycle of violence. Every threat, insider and outsider, needs to stay in your radar. For those of you that are on here that work in the world of school safety, you've all probably read the Secret Service reports. You know that 81% of all attackers broadcast in advance before they attack a school. Well, if 81% are telling us that they're coming, then they better be on our radar. That means your threat assessment teams, your behavioral risk assessment teams, your BIT teams, whatever you're calling them, have to be doing good work with a multidisciplinary group of professionals looking at the problem, looking at the threat, addressing it, and then managing it. It's not enough to do a threat assessment. You really have to do threat management. And it requires every single threat stays on your radar. And even when you've finished the threat assessment, remember, the dark thoughts just don't go away. So that student or that potential perpetrator that maybe is an adult focused on your school, you continue to manage with your local responders, your local law enforcement, to identify who that threat is and put good safety plans in place to protect your school environment. You know, one of the things that we know to be true is that so many threats begin in the classroom. What are the opportunities for our educators then to effectively manage when they can, or get help and report the incident when they can't? We'll talk a little bit about this in just a few minutes, because the threat in the classroom, that's starting in the classroom, the behavioral issues that we're seeing, the out of control activity, is really leading to a disruption of an entire school environment. All it takes is one student that's out of control to change the entire climate and culture in a school. And how many times have we seen kids tear up a classroom in the last 2 years? Happens pretty routinely. Well, what are we doing about it? How are we having conversations with the other students that are now impacted by this? And it's important that we understand that as we manage crisis, there's really 3 critical periods of time in crisis management. And the first is the first 5 minutes. This defines your life safety outcome, the impact you feel. Those first 5 minutes, all of your board policies, to your district guidance, to your school preparedness, all that training that we've done, all those lockdown drills, those fire drills, tornado drills, whatever drill you've done, the most important drill of your life, if you've done it with fidelity, And if you've taken it seriously and you model that and your educators and your kids are taking it seriously, it all comes down to this 5 minutes. And what you do here defines your outcome. And then those first 10 days, the decisions that are made in the aftermath of a critical incident, they'll define your next 5 years. So are you prepared for that? Can you justify what you've done? And the third time that becomes so critical is your first 6 months, which determines whether you're going to win back your community. And one of the things that we know is in the first year, we routinely lose our principals who just can't continue the work. We lose more than 70% of our staff in a school that's been impacted by violence within the first 2.5 years. So these time periods become so important that we look at understanding how to manage that crisis. So we're focused on doing the right thing and not focused on all the minutia around it. The best opportunity in all of this, though, starts with great communication. And I can't emphasize this enough because the single biggest failure occurring in our schools today, when we talk about critical incident, crisis management, is the failure of communication. We're failing at classroom management, how we communicate from teacher to student to manage the behavior. Why? Because we're not teaching our educators how to effectively do crisis prevention and intervention skills. And we're also failing to do rapid incident notification. And we win when we're notified early. If we're notified late, we fail every single time. The longer that notification takes, the longer the action, the critical incident occurs, and the more injury or death can happen. The other failures that we see with communication is parent communication. We still struggle to get this right. We're worried about how parents will respond, what parents will think of us. We're worried about litigation. We're worried about everything else around this communication. So we struggle and we slow down and we don't tell our parents everything. And then we take a hit because they start losing trust in us. And media communication, that's a whole nother half-a-day topic on the failures from school districts and how we're managing media during critical incidents. But we have to be aware that it starts in the classroom, but it doesn't stop in the classroom. It becomes a system failure. So if we can fix system failures and classroom failures, now we're fixing the communication failure, and that matters. Time matters, seconds count. Are you using your time wisely? We win at school when safety and education work together. One of the great components of this Lightspeed classroom audio system that I really like, I gotta just talk to you about this for a second, is that it provides a classroom management component and an incident notification component in one. Schools struggle today. Where do we spend our money? Do we spend it on school safety? Do we spend it on education? It's all coming from the same dollar. School safety is now a $5 billion a year industry and growing. Are we being good stewards of our money? What if we could create a system, create a product that does both help with classroom management and instant notification? Is that a win for us? Absolutely. So we're protecting and educating together. That classroom audio system allows a panic button that the front office can now hear what's happening in the classroom, get a response to the classroom faster, notify first responders faster, get school safety there faster. The return on investment's easy. Can you justify spending money when you're using a product that both protects and educates? I think so. And we see very few of those opportunities. But when you find them, whether it's in the sector of communication or any other sector, jump on that because it becomes much easier to justify. And that's a big win. You know, school safety, there is a huge cost. Make no mistake, and I think we all recognize that. But think about all of these items on this slide, from communications to panic button, access control, video cameras, all of this has come about in the last 20 years. And what's coming next in the next 20? Well, we don't even know. If you'd told me 5 years ago that facial recognition and weapons detection were going to be the big talk of the industry, I said, I don't think so. But I would have said the same thing about window film. And now, what do we know? Well, we know that 76% of all intruders are coming in your front door. That was identified in an algorithm study by Dr. John McDonald. If 76% of all intruders are coming in your front door, how are you securing your front door? What are you doing to target harden your doors and windows? Because whether it's Sandy Hook, Nashville, St. Louis, they're shooting through glass to get in. And we're seeing this more and more around the country. Locks have been a problem since the dawn of time. Our schools are often 50 to 60 years old. Yet the schools understand how expensive it is to change locks, to put an interior locking mechanism on, so a teacher doesn't have to step out in the hallway when shots are fired to try to get a key in the lock to lock your classroom down. It costs millions of dollars to lock the door. Or does it? Can you have a pre-locked door? If your district can't afford it, are you paying attention to what you can do with a limited amount of funds you are? I know you all are, because this is the world you're living in. But it's the conversation we have to have with our leaders, our school boards, our superintendents. You have to be able to sell your vision of why school safety is so important. And the importance of that translates to the need, the necessity for these items. And what is a reasonable standard of care today? Certainly video cameras in schools, but video cameras don't do a lot to stop the threat, but they're incredible for telling the story in the aftermath. So how can we better use cameras? Well, I think that's where the facial recognition, the weapons detection, license plate readers come on into play. A lot of the sensors that are now tying into school systems, whether it's vape detection, some new audio sensors are out there that capture keywords. The world of school safety is changing, and the evolution's happening incredibly fast. So understand there's some things that we can do at no cost, and then there's things that we're going to do at a high cost. And part of this is being able to justify it and sell your vision. And it's critically important that you have to sell your vision. Partner with your IT people, school safety people. The IT people and the school safety people should be linked at the hip today, having great conversation and building partnership, because so much of what we do is technology based, and it's going to continue to be that way. The threats of our time are changing significantly in the next several years. I think the threats are going to be much more technological based coming to us. And how do we respond to that? How do we get better at our craft of providing protection for something we can't even see? What does AI mean to the world of school safety? So we win when we make good decisions. We win when we protect kids and teach them what to do and how to respond. We win when we provide great education. If we do that, we have good opportunity to be a good, safe school. And I think success or failure comes down to just a few things. It all comes down to communication. Still the single biggest failure. Comes down to leadership. Who are the leaders in your building? Who are the leaders in your district? And what will you as a leader do to drive the direction of your district, your community, making school safety a priority? Success comes down to good training too. We're seeing this struggle, this yin yang, push pull on lockdown drills and whether they traumatize kids. Look, we've been training on what to do when you're on fire for 50 years, 60 years. What are we doing to talk about when you're under fire? Because if we're not willing to have that conversation, then we're not doing the right work and we're doing a disservice to our kids. Our kids are talking about this. This is mainstream for them, yet we're still scared of having that conversation in many of our communities around the country. Success comes down to systems. Is your system effective? Is your program effective? Is your district system in a good place? Or is it dysfunctional? Some of this is easy fix, some of it's big fix, some of it is pie in the sky fix, I understand. But we have to focus on these four things. That gives us the greatest opportunity. I asked a dear friend of mine who's been on the scene of 18 mass casualty events what he saw as the single biggest issue in crisis management. He said leaders are not present. And I thought about that and I thought about it and I realized he was right. I responded to a school shooting in a district that was not my own. And when I walked in to the reunification that was just starting, the superintendent came up to me and said, I can't be here. I just can't deal with this. And he left. And I was left with a couple of my team members and one person from that district to lead a reunification effort. Being present is critical. If you're not present, well, then we are going to cause loss of trust. And if we're not present, when loss of life happens, fingers are going to be pointed at us. And maybe rightfully so, because we're not owning this. And when we're not present, litigation happens. And when we're not present, legislation happens. So the very best crisis management is when leaders are present in front of their community, in front of their kids, in front of their educators, owning this, being willing to have the hard conversation and saying, this is what we did and this is what we didn't do. That's the honorable thing, but it's also the hard thing. As I said earlier, and I say this in all my presentations, prevention is a much better place to live than trying to live in the aftermath of tragedy. Do not be us. Be better than we were and do better than we did. A lot of lessons learned over the years. You can justify what you've done. The struggle is trying to justify what you didn't do. And when you have to look a parent of a murdered child in the eyes, or you have to look at the spouse of a murdered teacher in the eyes and try to explain what you didn't do, it's a bad place to be. It's never easy. But our people deserve our very best on every given day. With that, I'm going to open it up for questions. And I thank you for your time today.
Thank you, John. Really appreciate the insights that you provided. Again, I'll mention we do have a couple questions that I'm going to ask you, John, here in a moment. But if you have any additional questions, feel free to put them in the chat windows and we'll be sure to pass them along to John. John, just a couple questions that came through here. One is, what are some ideas or first steps to help begin to change a mindset or a culture? And are there any resources that you would recommend for beginning that process?
You know, a couple of things really come to mind. If you want to change a culture, it's find the leaders at your schools, find those core principles. We all have them in our district that are recognized as the leaders and get together with them, have one-on-one conversations with them. bring them together as a small core group and drive the conversation with them. Understand what the climate and culture is within your organization. Part of it is having access to your superintendent, being willing to have the hard conversations, being open to having conversations with your school board. I train school boards and I tell every board, you need to have an executive session with your school safety people every year and a public session. There's things that you need to hear that we can't talk about in public. And then there's things that we need to share with the public so they understand that what we're doing. Those conversations start to drive the climate culture. But climate and culture also starts every drill that we do. So often we do these lockdown drills, we walk down the hallway, we shake a door, we look in a window and we move on. Well, that's a failure. If you're not going into classrooms and talking to kids and giving them strategies for success, that's a lost opportunity. Because when our kids see us engaging with them and they see the work that we're putting in, they understand through the conversation the importance of it, that lifts up a climate culture of safety. It's exhausting to do. Like I have 4,800 classrooms in 157 schools. We made it a priority every first semester of every year to get in every single classroom to have conversations with every kid at age appropriate levels from 3 to 18. That starts to drive the conversation. But getting in front of your educators and being there at their team meetings in every school and having conversations about school safety and the changes and the direction and why we're doing what we're doing helps them understand. Being present and available to them. That's the other piece. So I think it all starts with conversation and a willingness to engage, and then finding ways to say yes. Everybody says no in K-12. Be different, be bold, say yes.
That's great. Another question that came through says that complexity is one of the biggest challenges that can lead to confusion in crisis situations, especially for teachers who are or should be primarily focused on educating their students. How do you keep things simple for teachers, staff, and students while also keeping them prepared and responsive at a time of crisis?
Great question. So a lot of school districts have these flip charts. Go to section 3 of subsection A, part 4, and if the tornado is coming, here's what you should do. Get rid of it. Throw that book away. You can do that in a one-pager. A great format, that exists that very easy to read, giving people strategies for success. You can do that through your training. It's really important that you focus on the basics. If you focus on just the basics, then you're building muscle memory for everybody. But you've really got to be committed to the cause and be willing to answer the questions that nobody else wants to talk about. Sometimes we're afraid to answer questions that our teachers have because we think, well, are we stepping out of bounds? Look, if they have a question, we need to answer it. And I think part of it is explaining to teachers their role, their responsibility, explaining to principals their role, their responsibility. Just one quick example of that. When I started, Frank DeAngelis, beloved principal at Columbine, took me aside. He said, you need to know 2 things. First thing you need to know is I will never be at incident command again. I'm going to be with my kids. That's where I need to be. That's where they need me to be. Okay, great. Who are you going to leave at incident command with me so you can go do that? Second thing he said to me was, you need to make sure that you have a map of every school, because when he got to incident command in the midst of the Columbine tragedy, he was handed a piece of paper and a pen and said, diagram your school in the hood of the police car so we know what it looks like in the building. And he told them, if you're basing my ability to draw on your ability to respond, we're going to lose. We can't do this. And I can't remember what my school looks like right now. So we have to provide those structures up front for our people. And whatever the case is, Third thing he told me was, our teachers sometimes don't have keys to lock their own doors. We need to make sure that our teachers have the tools that they need to stay safe. And if we do that, then we have opportunity to create successful systems and structure and during crisis. But whoever answered that question, you're right. Keep it simple. The complexity just adds chaos, and chaos in a K-12 system is the worst thing we could want.
Really good. Thank you. Final question here is just can you tell us more about your organization and how can someone join or partner with your organization?
Well, the Council for School Safety Leadership, you can go to cssleadership.org and see the work that we're doing. We provide support to school districts all over the country in the midst and in the aftermath of school tragedy or crisis. We'll do consultation in the midst of the crisis at no cost. We're a nonprofit organization, so we don't charge an arm and a leg. The goal is to provide support and services and help and get communities, school communities, back to the business of learning. And we do that with first responders, we do that with mental health, we do that with educational systems together and separately. And it's important that we all understand the work that we do is different, but it also interacts with each other. And how do we focus on our kids and our educators, getting them back to a place where they can be successful, and providing support for our leadership, because those four things that I talked about a little earlier, in the midst of crisis and tragedy in schools, four things come out of it if you're not careful. Loss of life, which you never get back. Lost trust, which will ruin your school environment and chase people out. Litigation and legislation. Those four L's can be devastating for not only a school, but an entire district and a community. We really focus on helping schools manage what that looks like.
That's great. One additional question just came through here at the end. Do you have a specific story or example of a school or school district doing a great job of putting safety protocols in place?
They're all over the country. I've seen amazing programs that you look at and you think, boy, they're really doing it right. And I hesitate to call out anybody, and I'll tell you why. Because you put it out there and somebody is going to study it. Somebody's going to pay attention to them. And if you want to contact me offline, I'll share those districts that are doing great stuff. But one of the fears that we've always had in this business is that our school attackers study the good and the bad. They study who's doing it well and who's not. And we never want to give them anything that would, indicate that they should focus on this school, and all of a sudden I say you're the very best and something happens and now we all fail. But if you want to call me offline, I'm happy to lift up some great school districts that are just rocking it.
That's great. Well, John, thank you so much for your insights today and for sharing this great information. Just as a reminder for everyone, we have recorded today's session and we'll be sending out the recording to all attendees and registrants in the next few days. And John already shared about his work with the Council for School Safety Leadership. Don't hesitate to reach out to them for more information or reach out directly to John. Thank you, John, and we look forward to continuing to work with you and the school districts across the country who are doing great work around this effort to keep our students and our staff safe.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks for what you're doing for us.
Absolutely. Everybody have a great afternoon, and we'll look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.